Back in Austin, only 48 hours earlier, Hamilton had delivered one of his most remarkable drives in red. Fourth place on paper, but in truth, a performance worthy of a win. The Ferrari fought him at every corner, yet he tamed it with patience and instinct, coaxing life from tires long past their limit. It wasn't speed that defined that race, it was control. The balance just vanishes mid-corner, he told his engineer over radio, yet he still held Piastri and Alonso behind with the precision of a surgeon. For those watching, it was vintage Hamilton, an artist painting masterpieces with a dull brush. When the news from Italy reached him, the reaction was pure Lewis quiet, analytical, almost eerily calm. He didn't explode in frustration or demand explanations. He smiled faintly and said, "So it wasn't all in my head." It was vindication after months of second-guessing, criticism, and pressure. Ferrari's leadership was stunned. The seven-time champion had been right all along. For half a season, he'd been driving a car that fought itself, and somehow, he still managed to bring it home in the points every weekend. The CEO of Ferrari called it the kind of endurance that only true champions possess. Inside the team, the mood shifted overnight. What had been seen as a season of disappointment suddenly became a story of rediscovery. Hamilton's calm through the storm had kept Ferrari from imploding internally. His experience had bought them time that now looked invaluable. The engineers worked through the night fitting temporary floor stiffeners and recalibrating the suspension geometry, guided by Hamilton's meticulous feedback. "Give me a front end I can trust," he told them, "and I'll give you the result you're looking for." For the first time this year, Ferrari believed him completely. Meanwhile, the rest of the Formula One world was left reeling. Social media exploded as word of the discovery leaked from Italian press outlets. Analysts debated how long the flaw had been there, and rival teams privately admitted respect for Hamilton's consistency despite such a handicap. Even Toto Wolff, the man he left behind at Mercedes, called it a masterclass in perseverance. The story dominated headlines heading into Mexico. Not just Ferrari's engineering failure, but Hamilton's superhuman ability to adapt, endure, and perform through it all. From the first laps of Friday practice, the signs were grim. The car slid unpredictably through the high-speed S's, rear instability in full display. The engineers insisted the data looked fine, nothing wrong with the floor, no anomalies in balance. Hamilton disagreed. "It feels like the rear's melting away mid-corner," he said over the radio, voice calm but edged with experience. "There's something we're not seeing." It was déjà vu, the same conversation he'd been having since Bahrain. But this time, under the Texan heat and the glare of 150,000 fans, the problem was undeniable. Qualifying was chaos. Ferrari misjudged track evolution, sending him out on the wrong tires at the wrong time. He scraped into Q3 by the skin of his teeth, then delivered a lap that was pure Hamilton, no grip, no confidence, yet somehow still elegant. He placed fifth, just behind Norris and ahead of Piastri, but the gap to pole was devastating, 0.8 of a second. Most drivers would have called a hopeless. Hamilton just nodded, looked at his race engineer, and said, "Let's turn this into something tomorrow." It wasn't optimism. It was discipline, the instinct of a driver who has learned that control begins where excuses end. Sunday arrived, and with it the heat. 38 degrees on track, tires blistering within 10 laps. Hamilton started on the medium compound, managing temperatures like a metronome. Lap after lap, he conserved energy, brake wear, and rubber, while others pushed too hard and paid the price. By mid-race, strategy began to play into his hands. Ferrari had gambled on a one-stop plan, trusting his ability to stretch the tires far beyond the limit. He did exactly that. Lap 36 Hamilton, still circulating on worn mediums, setting times only a few tenths slower than the leaders on fresh rubber. The crowd roared every time his name flashed purple on Sector 1. But behind the brilliance, the fight was brutal. The SF-25 wasn't compliant. It danced at the edge of disaster. Through turn 9, the steering would suddenly stiffen. Through turn 11, the rear snapped without warning. "It's alive," he radioed, half laughing, half grimacing. Yet he refused to yield. His braking was measured, his throttle feathered, his positioning immaculate. He defended against Oscar Piastri like a chess grandmaster, placing his car perfectly lap after lap, denying the Australian even a glimpse of DRS range. When the checkered flag fell, Hamilton crossed the line in fourth place, exhausted, sweat pouring, but unbroken. After the race, the cameras caught a moment few noticed. As he climbed out of the car, he leaned against the cockpit, breathing deeply, almost whispering to himself. Later, he would describe it simply: "That was everything I had." It wasn't about winning. It was about proving that, even when the machinery betrayed him, his instinct, his intellect, and his will could still carry him further than logic allowed. The engineers were quiet that evening. Some looked ashamed, because deep down, they knew he had driven a car that didn't deserve him and made it shine anyway. Back in Maranello, the debrief lasted hours. Every line of telemetry, every vibration, every microscopic detail of floor deflection was re-examined. And then came the revelation: the floor had been flexing unevenly. It wasn't setup, it wasn't tires, it wasn't driver error. It was a flaw in the car's DNA, a mechanical imperfection that had punished Hamilton all year, invisible to the naked eye, yet painfully obvious to the man who could feel it through the seat of his pants. Ferrari's engineers were stunned. The driver had seen what they couldn't. The press spun it as a Ferrari failure. But within the team, it became something else entirely, the proof that Hamilton's perception borders on superhuman. "He was describing behavior we didn't even have sensors for," said one engineer. "He felt what our computers missed." For a team searching for direction, that was gold. It reminded everyone why they had brought him here in the first place, not just for speed, but for wisdom. It started as a simple post-race inspection. In the quiet of Maranello's headquarters, two engineers stayed behind after the Austin Grand Prix, reviewing the telemetry from Hamilton's car. What they found was subtle, almost invisible, but it would change Ferrari's trajectory overnight. The data from the underfloor pressure sensors didn't align with the aerodynamic model. The left side of the floor was flexing under load, at high speed, just enough to distort airflow and destabilize the car's balance. The numbers were off by millimeters, but in Formula One, millimeters are the difference between control and chaos. For months, Ferrari had been chasing ghosts: tire pressures, suspension settings, wind, tunnel variances. Every adjustment seemed to make the car fast for a lap or two, only to lose rhythm again. But when the engineers overlaid Hamilton's feedback with fresh telemetry, the truth finally appeared. The SF-25's aero platform wasn't symmetrical, it was deforming differently on each side through the fastest corners. The car was quite literally fighting itself. The discovery hit the team like a lightning bolt. Hamilton had been describing this exact behavior since February, the front end that suddenly washed out, the unpredictable snap on throttle. He wasn't imagining it. He had felt a structural flaw before their computers could measure it. Ferrari's chief aerodynamicist, Riccardo Adami, immediately ordered a teardown of Hamilton's Austin chassis. Under microscopic examination, they found microfractures in the carbon fiber layering around the outer edge of the floor, not enough to break, but enough to flex unpredictably under aerodynamic load. The cause? A batch of components from an earlier production run, slightly less rigid than intended. It was the kind of defect that slips through even the most rigorous inspection invisible, but catastrophic in performance terms. When team principal Frederic Vasseur informed Hamilton, his reaction wasn't anger. It was clarity. "That's the missing piece," he said, voice low but firm. "Now we know what we're fighting." He didn't waste a second. The next morning, he was at the simulator in Fiorano, working side by side with the engineers to test new solutions. For hours, he ran simulations of floor stiffness adjustments, playing with ride heights, differential settings, and brake balance to see how each affected grip stability. At 40 years old, most drivers would have left that work to the engineers. Hamilton didn't. He treated it like preparation for battle. "I need to know exactly how it feels when it's right," he told them. "That way, I'll know when it's wrong again." Ferrari's engineering department went into overdrive. The factory buzzed through the night as they designed a temporary reinforcement package titanium, struts to stiffen the floor edges, slightly revised suspension mounting points, and new calibration in the heave spring to maintain aero stability. It wasn't a redesign, but a rapid fix, and Hamilton's fingerprints were all over it. He personally requested that data from his right-hand pressure sensors be doubled in frequency for the next race to better catch any flex anomalies mid-corner. The engineers agreed instantly. In Ferrari's 75-year history, few drivers had ever been so directly embedded in the technical process. The first simulation run with the reinforced floor stunned the engineers. The car's downforce curve finally matched its CFD projections. No more random oscillations. No more unexplained loss of grip. Hamilton's voice came through the simulator intercom, calm and composed. "That's the first time I felt it stable through the high speed." For the first time all season, the virtual car behaved exactly as expected. One of the senior engineers later admitted it was like someone switched the lights on in a dark room. When Ferrari briefed the CEO of the company, he was reportedly speechless. How did this go unnoticed for so long, he asked. The answer was as humbling as it was inspiring. They had the world's most advanced technology, but it took a human to feel what the sensors missed. That human was Lewis Hamilton. It reminded everyone in Maranello why his presence mattered beyond fame or marketing. He wasn't just a driver, he was a diagnostic instrument with emotion and instinct, capable of reading a car like a musician reads a score. Heading into the Mexican Grand Prix, Ferrari implemented the temporary fix on both cars, but only Hamilton's would feature the full reinforcement package. The plan was clear. Test it under the harshest possible conditions, the high altitude of Mexico City, where thin air amplifies every aerodynamic flaw. If the fix worked there, it would work anywhere. The engineers flew out with cautious optimism, but Hamilton's confidence was unshakable. If the balance holds, we can fight, he said before leaving Fiorano. And if we can fight, we can win again. The transformation in atmosphere was remarkable. For months, Ferrari's garage had been defined by tension. Now there was purpose. Hamilton's calm leadership filtered through every department. Young engineers who once feared speaking up now stayed late, sketching improvements, driven by the belief that they were part of something historic. In a sport dominated by data, Ferrari had rediscovered the power of intuition, guided by the only driver on the grid who could turn feeling into science.